Let's Talk Heard. Hi, Joe.
Hi,
Thank you
Cami.
for doing another podcast with me.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about healing today and the holistic nature of healing. And it's just, this subject is so important for me. I almost feel like it's kind of just understanding of it is like part of my purpose here. I don't know why, but it just feels so intrinsic to everything that I do. And I wanted to start by, because I listened to a podcast the other day that was really fascinating. It was with a man who's a nuclear physicist, and he was talking about how computers are going to become quantum computers when they can figure out I think part of it is keeping them cool enough or something. And what was really fascinating about what he was saying is that plants, like nature, all of it, like a plant is a quantum computer, even like a cell of a plant that can do photosynthesis. I don't know all the science of it, but they can do that, and they can do it at room temperature. They can, the chemistry is the same. And so, but the one thing that bothered me about this interview that makes me think of, how it relates to what we're going to speak about today is that he was saying that in the future, we're going to be able to eradicate all disease. We're going to be able to, live forever because these computers are going to be able to figure it all out for us. And I just feel that kind of triggers me in a way, because I'm like, that just feels like a huge, big missing of the point of healing or disease, because for me, it's like, it's an opportunity, these illnesses, and then whatever way that you want to, whatever aspect of disease or even injury or anything that, can physically go wrong as such. It's like, it's not just random, it's all connected, and it's all connected with our awakening process. And that's what just amazes me. And it's so wonderful. And I just, I suppose I'm impatient being an Aries, but I just feel like, I just want more people to get this, to like start to realize the opportunity that's there. Yeah. So I think, so I want you to tell your wonderful story, which is what prompted us to do this, because it's such an amazing example of that. And like, why it's all happening. Why did these kind of apparently random and apparently just negative things happen to us and our animals and all the rest of it. So yeah.
So the thing that I noticed in your story about the computers and the thing that the point where you were triggered, I thought, well, it's like the thing that is triggering Cami in there is that there's still this quest to avoid suffering and live eternally, and it's like this quest, and really in its core it's resisting what is, right? And I suppose when we're talking about healing, it's like embracing everything that it contains and getting to know it intimately and absorbing the messages within it and moving through it, which is not at all the same as I don't want to feel this.
And seeing that there is a message. There is a point to it. It's not just incoherence or irrational. Why? And it surprised me because this man was a real why person. Like, he wants to answer the questions. So why is that assumption made that it's just a random thing that we just have to live with? Or maybe it's like a Darwinian thing that there's like this survival of the fittest race going on and that there's no more meaning to it than that. But yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe if we could ask him that question and we could ask each person that same question, well, why for you is that such a benefit to be able to say we will be able to live forever and sickness won't exist anymore? Why is that important for you? Because probably there is an individual yearning. And when I come to think of quests and yearning for a particular outcome, it brings me back to the nature of human beings to look for expansion. And we are beings that are here to live this experience of expansion. And so, yeah, that's interesting to me. Is that what pushes us to discover and to plunge further deeper and go further? Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me, it's a bit of a funny analogy, but it reminds me of cars that are, the back wheels are powered and not the front wheels.
Yes.
What do they call that? Rear propulsion.
Yeah, I think.
And you, I don't know if you've ever been in or driven a car like that, but it's true that you do have this feeling of, lightness. But at the same time, it's really unstable. And I get the notion that inherent in our core, which is made for expansion, the way that we go into this expansion is allowed by a kind of inherent instability,
Yes.
and it's that instability which is rather delicious, but it is hard to navigate and to handle. And this is what brings us back to the present moment, and that's why it's so important to always come back to the present moment.
That really.
So anyway, that came to mind.
It sort of makes me think of that kind of idea of instability. Makes me think of like not knowing, and that I think sometimes we make these assumptions, like our society has just created this kind of shell or this structure that makes us feel safe, so that because we know things. And that's what that seems like to me, that way of looking at disease, like that it's not got an inherent meaning. And it's also, it also what you were saying reminded me of the other thing that slightly kind of I find a bit frustrating about that interview, is like, we are eternal beings. We might not live in this body forever. But there's this kind of, for me, it's so kind of strange that people can be so intelligent in a certain way, like able to build these things and have these kind of visions, and yet to not seemingly know or believe or be aware of, I don't know what it would be, of that whole spiritual element that, just that there is that coherence, there is a source, there is there is the eternal part of us that is there. So why do we need to stay in this body forever? If we really, and that death is really a transition, and it's more of a kind of illusion when you see it from that point of view. So it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. And I want to say that we are so much bigger than any illness or death. These are just components that help us on our voyage.
Yeah, exactly.
And to see it otherwise, to see it as something that needs to be conquered, is giving it not too much importance, but not giving it its real role, you know. It's not a threat.
Yes.
It's not anything that takes away from us. It's just, that's just not it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's literally our path home. I always say it's like our way of transitioning out of this body. So it's not wrong. It's just like our next path, our next stage of our existence.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you can.
So,
yeah, I feel like I've got more relaxed about that over time because, you know, especially with animals and being able to allow them to just be, or being able to kind of accept their flexibility with their body and not having to kind of try and fix them all the time because just for the sake of it, you know, because I feel like it is all so coherent and so anchored into this one source that things just don't sort of happen for no reason, even though it can seem, because we've only got this one little perspective on everything. So we're quite challenged by that.
So, I was thinking recently about this challenge about coming back to the present moment, because I've had some experiences recently that have been very powerful and awe-inspiring with particularly Kumara. And then I realized one day that because that had inspired me so much, it created a wobble, that instability that we were talking about. And I thought, I'm not centered anymore.
Wow.
You know, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. It's like as soon as we live something powerful and we feel great, it's like we want to categorize or put it in a box and think, right, that's it.
Yeah, that's so familiar. Yeah.
And so the result of that, the fact that I wasn't centered anymore, I started to feel not so good. So that was the first alarm bell. Like, why are you not feeling good? Something's, you know, shifted. And I realized that being centered, really, today I understand it's really not having any expectations and just listening and listening and listening and being part of that whole. I like to describe it as a movement, because when I listen, it's like I'm feeling the movement of energy. So we call it listening, but you know, it's also looking and feeling and all together all at the same time. And so I realized, I thought, wow, so this is our huge challenge then, is to constantly come back to center, constantly come back to nothingness, and just be. And it's really sporty.
Almost like, yeah, because I think we, in a way, we purposefully move a little bit further away, just so that we can find that way back more in a more what's the word? Almost like a more obvious way, you know, like a way that we can really, really understand. And it's almost like, you know, when you were talking about how you had that inspiration, and I always feel that when I get that, and it's like something in you wants to crystallize that and just hold on to it. And it's that causes the wobble, because it's almost like it solidifies it in a way that...
Because it's so wonderful to live that, but...
Yeah. But it can't, but nothing
in fact, it doesn't belong to us.
Yeah. So then it's sort of, then you're kind of missing the flow then again. So you have to kind of find it again. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's reminding me of another word that has been coming up in me recently, grace. And that whole thing about grace and living out of grace and with grace is about having no control and knowing that it is just given to you and you don't have to perform well. You know, it's really just, wow, everything's just here.
Yeah.
So what you were saying about the wobble bringing you back, and almost we do that almost deliberately so that we can come back to that center. It's got to the point now where when I have decentered and my emotions are coming down, I actually really am thankful for that, because when my emotions come down, my energy spark calms down and I come into this state of nothingness. Like, seriously, I can, in that state, I'll be like, I'll spend a couple of hours literally doing nothing because part of me just can't. It's maybe because, inspired action is just not possible at that moment. And I'm so grateful for that state because it so brings me back to just being. Maybe that's a bit extreme, but
that sounds really powerful to me.
Would you say that emotions like sadness and depression, they are there to serve that purpose? Like to slow you down because you need to slow down to come back to what's essential for you?
Yeah, I think, I maybe not always, but definitely sometimes, I think it's important not to make rules, like say, that's what that's for, because it's always a unique moment of living. But yeah, definitely. I feel like those, what we might class as negative emotions, are always, there's an always again, but they have this element.
Often,
they have an element of opportunity. Like they're like a kind of a form of light that just gets you to see in a particular way that enables you to, like you say, to find your anchor again. So I think if you can recognize, like if you can sort of see it as an opportunity, as a sort of portal or a doorway or something, that it's gonna lead you to somewhere. There was one recently, I'm trying to remember what it was, and it was it really helped. Oh, that's what it was. I thought that I don't know if I did, but when I was driving, I had a kind of mental glitch, and I was driving at like the speed limit was 110, and I was just driving, and I saw this camera. I was well aware of this camera, and I just sort of thought I was driving within the speed limit, and the light went off, and I was like, oh my God. And I think that I must have been going 112, and somehow in my mind I was thinking it was 120. So like, that's kind of challenging for me, because it feels like, oh my God, I've got, I might have this fine, and it's, can't really afford that. And so I thought, I'm going to make this into an opportunity. Like every time I think about it, it's going to make me feel great. Like it's going to be, it's hard to describe this, but it's going to be like a bridge to feeling expansion, like to feeling that those physical things are not relevant. They're not, they don't, like, I am limitless. And it's an opportunity, like it's a way of, because when something tries to make you feel like, when you think about it, you feel like a bit annoyed or depressed or like, you know, anxious or whatever. But instead you can actually use it as just as a way to, I'm really trying to sort of describe how to, it's one of those things you sort of catch like in your mind and like, you're like, oh, that's how it is. And you can't quite describe.
Yeah, and it's so clear,
it's
and yet
like,
finding the words is hard.
Yeah. It's like you've got the power to feel any way that you want to feel.
Yeah.
And you can give something the significance that you choose to give it. Yeah. So I'm going to give that the significance of being a blissful experience, just of being able to experience that in that way without, so it's like, and then it's almost like your ego's like, oh no, you're not gonna, you're not, because you do that, and you might even a few times think of it and feel really good, and then your ego's like really springs it on you, like that kind of anxiety, like, oh my god, I forgot about that, and so it's like it's a constant. You have to stay quite engaged with it. You have to be quite. I'm trying to think, attentive with it.
Yes, you need to
witness.
It's
basically just that you have, it's like you have the choice about how you feel. And it's almost like an exercise. Like, here's an exercise. Here's something that you ought to feel bad about. And that there's no real good thing to feel about it, but it can be a limitless experience.
So if I take that back to the emotions and that kind of calming sensation that I feel, which could be described as sadness or like a mild kind of depression. It's very slow. And so you're saying about seeing that as an opportunity, and the thing is that I've experienced it so often now. I anticipate it. I kind of know the gift in it, so I welcome it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know that it's there because I just got a bit carried away with, these wonderful things, and it's perfectly human. And so the fruit of that, I took Umia out for a walk this morning, and actually, I'm calling it sadness or like a mild depression, but I feel like I'm on drugs or something. I'm so calm. I feel like I'm floating,
like a
really.
Sedative.
Yeah. And so we went out. Now she's only been out once with me before, and she's so sweet but so attentive to everything. It's like she feels everything in every cell of her body. And what I wanted to say was that my calm state today, that coming back to center, meant that we had that being together. And I was able to come back to that state of having no expectations, because mentally my energy was just not there to have any expectations. I just didn't have the energy to conceive of anything. I just thought, we need to spend some time together. Let's go out. And with each step, she kind of guided me to what I could do, the posture I could have to help her feel good. And that was my anchor. And so I realized, you've come back to center again, Jo. This is it. You're back into the bliss.
Yeah.
Back into the bliss.
Yeah. That reminds me of, I'm not sure if it was the ticket thing or something different, but I was feeling a bit out of balance, like you say. And I actually felt like kind of aware of this ability that I could have of engaging. Like, if you imagine being like, how you can get like a wire. This is one of my analogies again, but like a thick wire that's made up of lots of little wires. But like what seems to happen is that like when you get into that unbalanced state is that the wires like aren't all lined up with each other. It's like some are longer and some are shorter, and it's all like kind of a little bit out of kilter. And so what I felt that I needed to do energetically was just re-engage with all the wires, like which were all the parts of myself. And it was a physical kind of feeling thing to do. Like it wasn't anything mental. Like it wasn't about thoughts. It was just about like just kind of like you say in a way, re-anchoring with all, like evening up all of the different wires so they create one again. And I think maybe that's so when we get the negative emotions, we're just like disengaging with some bits and over engaging with others, and we just lose that whole feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what happens.
And so
carry on.
I even thought that this is the beauty of our experience here, is to feel that instability momentarily and to have the joy of coming back into the bliss.
Exactly, yeah.
And to discover that route again and again and again.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's such a lovely feeling, the re-engagement, like the reconnection.
You said about the coming back in, the reconnection, and so to finish off what we're saying, it's like we're never arrived. That movement of instability and coming back. In fact, that's the whole point of us like being here in our experience, which makes us think about sickness and death. It's like, why would you want to fix everything down if our real raison d'etre is this movement?
Yeah, and there's a part of us that's scared of that, because we avoid it. So we're so defensive about it, just as a sort of as a species. I don't know if that's the right word, but as a mentality, we've just got this like terror of allowing that rhythmic flow of like falling apart and coming back together and falling apart and coming back together. Yeah.
Well, that's really nice. I really like that, falling apart. I really like that.
Because if you think about it, why would you want, like if we lived in a world where there was no dis-ease as such, no like fluctuation in anything, and we were living forever and there was no contrast, the meaning would be gone in a sense, because there would be it would be like, because then we would want to be comfortable all the time. So then you wouldn't be hungry, you wouldn't be thirsty, you wouldn't be like a physical being anymore. And there's all kind of ramifications.
We wouldn't really be alive.
Exactly, because life
is movement. Life.
Yeah.
And life is moving and between contrast.
Yeah, because it's not just physical contrast, it's emotional contrast. Like imagine you were always in the same mood. It would just be, I don't think
I can't even imagine it.
I don't think we can conceive of that, because it's not really who we are, I suppose. Yeah.
So you were talking about the Kumara story.
Just because it's such an amazing, like a kind of testimony to that way of perceive of that opportunity of healing, like what it's there for and why these things happen.
So well, I'll start from the beginning then. So Kumara last year, he was 6, and it was just before I was doing an event. It was like the day before I was doing a big salon affair, and I noticed a slight white veil over his eye.
Wow.
And I was quite surprised and shocked because it seemed to be sudden. And of course, I had all of these questions like, oh, but when did you really last look at his eyes, and how long has it been here? So there was this kind of sort of worry about, am I looking after my horses well enough? Am I really looking at them and taking the time? Anyway, so there was all that side of wanting to look after him properly, as as we feel for the animals that we love. And I phoned the vet straight away because I know that eyes are not things that you want to kind of hang about on. And she gave a treatment which lasted 5 days initially. And at the same time, I decided to support healing with a herbal mixture that I ordered specifically for eye problems. So I do remember that for these first few days, I was very concerned. And at the same time, you realize that you have no control. You give the treatment, and at the same time, you don't know. So there's that inherent sense of, where are we going and what's happening, and am I doing everything I should be? So quite an unstable kind of feeling. A lot of movement, if I can call it that. And 5 days of treatment from the eye drops cleared up a little bit, but not very much. And I knew that if these eye conditions can lead to permanent like scarring, which can affect vision, sometimes ulcers, and in the worst case scenario, losing the eye. So, I was aware that it could have an impact on his life, on how he was going to feel, or just different things like that. So I knew that it was really important, because I'm quite often quite cool about different physical ailments that they can have. I'm not someone that gets frazzled easily. Anyway, so one day I went to bed, and I was lying in bed, and I realised that I needed to let go, because I couldn't control it, and I wanted to respect Kumara completely, and I wanted to allow him to take charge of his own healing and his own body and his own story. Because I'm saying taking charge of his healing, but maybe he was deciding that he wanted, to be having this. And so it was opening myself up to, this is happening for a reason, and it's part of our story. It's happening for his story and my story, individually and together. And I realized that the depth of all that was beyond my consciousness at that moment, but I was opening myself up to just the depth of what this was meaning. So the treatment from the vet continued for another 5 days, because it wasn't cleared up. And I decided to really give it my all. And the herbs, it was really interesting, because I remember it was almost like I wanted to bless the herbs. So that's interesting. I didn't do that with the medicine. Isn't that funny? Yeah. But I had a feeling that the herbs, it was really a present that I bought, and I wanted to offer to Kumara. And I imagined, it going into his body, and that his body was going to do with it whatever he wanted and whatever he decided. And in giving a gift, it's true that when you give a gift to someone, you're not going to tell them how to use it. Like if you give someone an ornament, you're not going to tell them that you're going to put it there.
Yeah.
A gift is that. A gift is once you give it, it's out of your hands, and you hope it's going to be of use to the person, that they're going to have some joy through it, but really you're liberating it. And so the blessing that I put into the herbs was a conscious decision to relinquish any influence in the herbs that came from me. Any influence of worry or desire or whatever. Even any love that I could have had for Kumara, I didn't want the herbs to have anything of me. I wanted it completely for him. I wanted to really give him full sovereignty over these herbs. And all of that was quite unconscious in a way. You know, I didn't formulate it verbally. Yeah. It was a real feeling and a really powerful feeling. And I knew that he knew about it. You know, I knew that we were connected. And I could feel him knowing where I was at, that I really was giving away control at each moment. Each time I put the drops in his eye, I thanked him for participating in the treatment. And I said to him, I'm really working on relinquishing all control to you. And it is an effort because I'm human and it's not easy, but I'm doing it. So it's there, and it's there for you and for me and for us. So I gave him the herbs, and I had to every single day come back to that center that we were talking about, because I would give away control, and then when I was next to him, I had this overpowering urge to look in his eye because I wanted to make sure it was gone.
Absolutely.
And it was like, it's like coming back to this quantum guy and saying all sickness will be healed. And I could see myself doing it, and I laughed at myself every time I was looking in his eye, and I'm like, oh, I think I could still see it. So one day I just said to myself, you know, how long is this going to last? For years? Are you going to look in his eye all the time? Like trying to find any trace of this thing that's left, you know, how long are you going to continue this when really your heart's desire and what you've promised him and you is to let go? Are you ready to let go now? So I was like, yeah, stuff it, I'm going to let go. We've been through this, we've talked about it, we've done the treatment, and at some point I just need to just breathe it out into the universe and let things happen. Just let things happen. And there was a phase in that relinquishing of control. In fact, when I decided to do that, I thought, Kumara, I really trust you. Really trust you to direct your life and your body, because you have so much more wisdom than me. And I want to follow you, and I'm going to follow you and whatever you decide. And in that moment, this question, this kind of awareness came into me, was ask why it's there. And I thought, wow, yeah, I didn't even consider that before. It's like there's a reason behind this. It's an expression of something. And it's an expression of something that he has in his heart. You know, when I speak about heart, it's like the essence of the being, you know, the being that's connected to source, to the universe. And I thought, wow, source, universe is expressing itself in Kumara and is expressing itself in this eye condition. So I asked the question, and I asked it to Kumara. And I said, so, you know, now I've completely given up control. I can trust you completely. So can you tell me why you've welcomed this condition into your body, and what are you expressing through this? What is this an expression of? And the response was immediate.
Wow.
And he showed me a kind of a sadness.
Yeah.
And I felt a sadness, like a disappointment, and a lack of hope that was beginning. So this initial thing that was just a disappointment was crystallizing into like a lack of hope. And it was to do with discovering things, discovering new things, and moving, lots of movement, and going out into the world and looking and touching and turning over.
That's so amazing.
Very busy.
Yeah.
And I understood that how important his eyes were for doing that. And that because that thing, he was starting to feel that it was cut off to him. Well, it was like cutting off his vision was an expression of that.
Yeah.
So I heard the request. In fact, I heard the desire for exploration and for living new, different things. And I stayed with my decision and my pledge to him to allow him full control over whatever he decided to heal or not to heal. And at the same time, I said, I completely see your heart desire. I hear your disappointment. I hear what that's doing. This, like, you know, when you're disappointed again and again and again, you actually stop looking for the thing that you want, you know? It's like looking for a present under the Christmas tree and it's never there. Well, after you've spent X times looking for it, well, one day you just think, oh, there's no point. And that's what I felt in him. I said, but whatever you decide for your health, I've heard that desire. And do you know what? It's the same desire that I have.
Wow. Yeah.
I so hear that desire in your heart because I have a desire that's so similar to that. And I know that that's actually why you came into my life, was because we were going to live that together. And I've got some stuff to sort out. I've got some stuff that's blocking me from living that. And I think that knowing that you have that similar desire could actually give me the motor and the what's the word I'm looking for? The motivation to go forward.
And courage also.
Promise for that's it, and say for myself and for you, let's move forward together. Wow. Let's unblock this together.
That's so amazing.